Good morning, and welcome to Grinnell United Church of Christ. I am the Reverend Jessica Margrave Sherm, and it is my distinct honor to be the pastor here at Grinnell UCC and to be with you today as we honor and remember and memorialize Lois Strickler. Just a few housekeeping things today. Thank you for your faithfulness in wearing masks and staying socially distanced. There will be some responsive reading today and some congregational singing, which we know is incredibly important for a service such as this, while also being one of the ways that we can most easily spread our germs to each other. So I invite you just to remain masked as we respond together and as we sing together. Also, this might be a good day to practice using our inside voices rather than over projecting as we are wont to do. Our hope today is that we each would find strength from each other, from our roots and sources of faith that connect us to each other and to that which is greater than ourselves. It is no coincidence that this service for Lois is happening today in the midst of Advent. Last week we lit the first, our candle. Our hope has gone out. I will relight it because that is something that we know and cling to. Today is last Sunday was the first Sunday for Advent, and we honored hope. And so we will relight that candle for hope, knowing that it is with us and shining for us today. Tomorrow is the Sunday where we light the candle for peace. And it's my prayer that that peace, which passes all understanding, would surround us and flow through us as we gather today. I invite you now to prepare yourselves for worship as we read responsively our call to worship, a poem written by E.E. Cummings. You will respond with what is in bold. I carry your heart with me. I am never without it. I fear no fate. I want no world. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. Our opening prayer today will be from a book entitled Ash and Starlight, Prayers for the Chaos and the Grace of Daily Life by Ariane Braithwaite Lane. Hear these words of prayer when we are grieving a goodbye. Compassionate One, be with us in our goodbyes. When we are asked to open our hands and to release what we have held and held tightly, place your peace between our fingers. Put your comfort in the cracks and crevices of our heart. Use our falling tears as nourishment for this ground of grief, bearing fruit for a new season, also promising sweetness to come. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Lois Elaine Strickler, daughter, wife, and mother, was born in 1944 at the hospital in Jefferson, Iowa. She grew up on a farm northeast of Panora with her parents, Clyde and Phyllis Wood. Lois grew up attending the Church of the Brethren north of Panora. Initially, Lois attended country school before going to town school in Panora. She graduated from Panora High School. After high school, she attended McPherson College in McPherson, Kansas, which is affiliated with the Church of the Brethren. She earned a degree in business education. Following her junior year at McPherson, Lois spent the summer working in Yellowstone National Park at Lake Hotel. She was an administrative assistant to management staff. It was here that she met the person who would become her partner, Gail Strickler, Jr. Lois and Gail were married in the next summer in the Panora Church of the Brethren in June. They spent the summer working at a church camp near McCall, Idaho, before moving to New York City, where Gail attended seminary. There, Lois was secretary to a well-respected professor of Christian ethics. When Gail took an intern year at a small church in southwestern Kansas, Lois taught school in a small district near Dodge City. Over their 55-plus years of marriage, Lois and Gail lived in Britt, Iowa, New Braunfels, Texas, Omaha, Nebraska, Minot, North Dakota, Marshall, Minnesota, and Marshalltown, Iowa, before moving to the Mayflower, a retirement community here in Grinnell. Both of Lois and Gail's children were born while the family lived in New Braunfels. During this time, Lois was the coordinator for Lamaze classes. She went on to work at the University of Nebraska in Omaha, the College of Business. Her last place of employment was the Iowa Veterans Home in Marshalltown. Lois developed serious health problems beginning in 2013 with a diagnosis of lymphoma. These health issues became pronounced after moving to the Mayflower in 2017. Eventually, her body could no longer fight off the insults thrown at her. She died in late September at the Grinnell Hospital when her organs refused to failed trying to repel an infection. She is survived by her partner Gail, adult children Ray Strickler of Oakland, California, and Mara Strickler of Pella. She is also survived by many cousins and special friends she made at the different locations where she has lived. She was preceded in death by her parents and grandparents. A second service will be held in the late spring at Urbandale United Church of Christ, after which the family will scatter Lois's ashes, and details of that service will be announced at a later date.
The scripture reading is from Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 through 12. I'm reading from the Inclusive Bible. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on the mountainside, and after he sat down and the disciples had gathered around, Jesus began to teach them. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. The kingdom of heaven is theirs. Blessed are those who are in mourning. They will be consoled. Blessed are those who are gentle. They will inherit the land. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. They will have their fill. Blessed are those who show mercy to others. They will be shown mercy. Blessed are those whose hearts are clean. They will see God. Blessed are those who work for peace. They will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of their struggle for justice. The kingdom of heaven is theirs. You are fortunate when others insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of slander against you because of me. Be glad and rejoice, for your reward in heaven is great. They persecuted the prophets before you in the very same way.
In addition to our gospel lesson, I invite you to hear these two additional passages of scripture. First, from Psalm 121. I raise my eyes toward the mountains. Where will my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. God won't let your foot slip. Your protector won't fall asleep on the job. No, Israel's protector never sleeps or rests. The Lord is your protector. The Lord is your shade right beside you. The sun won't overpower you during the day, neither will the moon at night. The Lord will protect you from all evil. God will protect your very life. The Lord will protect you on your journeys, whether going or coming, from now until forevermore. And then a second reading. Hear this from 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, but if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I might boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part, but then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love remain, these three. And the greatest of these is love. I have had the distinct privilege of being Lois's pastor for a little over 3 years now. But many of you sitting in this sanctuary or attending this service online or gathered with us in spirit today have known Lois for far longer and more deeply than I was able to. But my guess is that whether you knew Lois for 3 or 4 years or 30 plus years or nearly all of her life or your life, that we all might use similar words to describe her. Words that resonate with these scriptures that we've heard today. Words like faithful, loving, a blessing. Mara used words like reserved and modest and generous and kind to describe her mom. I think of words like simple and peaceful and gentle when Lois comes to mind. With spiritual roots in Hinduism and Buddhism, the act of repeating a word or a sound or a statement or a slogan over and over and over is called a mantra. Mantras are used to increase our concentration during meditation and prayer. While the practice of using authentic Sanskrit or similar languages in mantras belong to its Eastern roots alone, the idea behind this practice of praying a word or praying a phrase, usually in with our breath and out with our breath, has evolved and expanded into nearly all branches of religious and non-religious spiritual practice. Repeating or meditating upon or praying a mantra-like word or phrase is one of the simplest, holiest, and most accessible ways that we can center ourselves spiritually. It's one of the best ways to ease our anxiety and to ground ourselves in the present. It is telling to me that in these 3 scriptures that Lois wanted read today, scriptures that her family chose to honor her, each of them rely on a mantra-like repetition of key words or phrases to anchor the passage. In Psalm 121, we hear time and again, "The Lord will protect you." Other translations say, "The Lord will guard you," or "The Lord will keep you." In 1 Corinthians 13, we hear over and again, love is, love is, love is. And in Matthew 5, we hear, blessed are those, blessed are you. Other translations say, happy are those, or happy are you. I think it's telling. I did not know before preparing for today that Lois was a Lamaze instructor. And so to think about that season of her life, grounded and breathing through what lies ahead in the act of labor, I find it even more interesting that these repeated words and phrases are part of the gift that we have to remember her by. Speaking specifically to Psalm 121, but applicable to all of these scriptures, commentator Howard Wallace says, the repetition of these phrases undergirds the assurance that we have as people of faith. These words are the spoken promise of the Lord's protection and love and blessing at every turn, in every moment. But as the psalmist and Jesus and the Apostle Paul knew and proclaim in many places in Scripture, even the one who is faithful does not attain a life protected from harm or suffering. Nevertheless, Wallace says, the simple assurance of protection, of blessing, of love, has the power to strengthen the believer so that they might face the difficulties and hardships that may come. These prayers are not limited by experience or circumstance, Instead, they assert the possibility of trusting while we are waiting for whatever experience lies ahead. Wallace says, while the promise of the Lord's protection and presence can be understood neither simplistically nor literally, trust in those promises is grounded in a reality that supersedes our experience. It is grounded in our knowledge of the Lord as creator and in the fact that the larger community of faith has discovered that God is the one in whom we can place our trust. A prayer of trust is not simply an isolated word about our immediate well-being. Rather, a prayer of trust evokes and participates in a relationship that stretches beyond both the experienced world and the present. Wallace concludes, to pray a prayer of trust is to commit oneself to a relationship or a web of relationships that incorporate creation and history, and the promise of security, blessing, and love, which incorporates our individual needs, spreads to the end of the world and time. Hear that last line again. To pray a prayer of trust is to commit oneself to a relationship or a web of relationships that incorporate creation and history, and the promise of security, blessing, and love, which incorporates our individual needs, spreads to the end of the world and time. I think of the web of relationships that Lois was committed to in her lifetime. I can imagine the times that she prayed these mantra-like prayers under her breath, prayers for strength or for help during life's difficulties, prayers of protection and blessing, perhaps over her marriage or for her children or for her colleagues or her faith communities. Surely Lois prayed these prayers when life was going well, but more likely than not, she was praying them when things were not how she would have hoped they would be. Perhaps during seasons of grief or estrangement or heartbreak or loss or lack or uncertainty or fear. Her quiet, simple, profound faith undergirding these relationships, continuing to knit together this web of love that reverberates even now throughout all creation, to the end of the world, and throughout all time. During the last in-person visit I had with Lois, I asked her how I might pray for her. And the first thing she did was to remind me that I needed to ask Gail what he would want prayed for as well. Clearly because even in her moment of need, she was mindful of his heart and his spirit and his well-being. And then second, Lois asked me to pray for strength for whatever might lie ahead for her. In just 2 sentences, Lois modeled her truest essence before my eyes: an abiding concern for the well-being of her loved ones, and a faithful trust that she would be held, protected, blessed, strengthened, and loved by her sustainer, come what may. We are each a part, however large or small, of Lois's web, and she lives on in each of us in our kindness and concern for others above ourselves, in acts of generosity and in moments of prayer. Lois lives on in the music and scholarship and art and education that sustained her throughout her lifetime and that she and Gail have invested in, that we've been invited to invest in on her behalf. Lois lives on in her children, Mara and Ray, in your creativity and your kindness and your love of self and neighbor. And Lois lives on in you, Gail, mindful that even in her bodily absence, where you go, she goes. Where you live, she lives. And as was the case in your life together, your God is her God, with whom and in whom she now rests eternal. Friends, I close with these 3 simple reminders, and my hope is that these might be the prayers that are always under your breath as you continue to be a part of Lois's web and knit the web that continues out from all of us, aligning creation and sustaining us for all that is to come. Remember that in the end, 3 things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Find strength in the knowledge that the Lord will protect you on your journeys, whether going or coming, from now until forevermore. And find comfort, knowing that blessed are those who mourn, for they will be consoled. Thanks be to God for Lois, who lived and embodied these truths so very well. Amen.
I first of all want to say thank you to all of you for being here today. In a way, I've been looking forward to this day, but dreading it at the same time. I want to say thank you to the church staff, to Elizabeth and to Ken for his music, to Lee, the custodian, for his helping have things ready, and to Pastor Jessica for all the work she has done, both in terms of this service and contact with Lois and I in the recent months. I want to just mention a word about the rabbits. I don't even remember what year it was, but one of our nephews gave Lois a rabbit. And you know what happens when you start having one rabbit, soon becomes 2, and then becomes 6, and then becomes... and the rabbits that you see are a small part of her collection. I chose these two rabbits up front that are on the floor here because they seem to me to be guardian rabbits, that they would be there, whether here or at home, for Lois. Just want to mention really quickly that having had the experience of conducting numerous funerals and having attended a good number, this has been the same but different. There's a universal kind of quality to what happens with death, but there's also something very personal. And as an example, I think about the matter of how the issue of health is usually involved as a general rule. But things were very personal, very unique to Lois in terms of what she experienced. And so there's that quality of being shared with many, but being very unique. Over the past 2 months, there's been a roller coaster of emotions for me. It was less than 48 hours from the time I took Lois to the emergency department. Till she was dead. Her health had not been good, but what happened certainly was nothing that I saw coming. As far as emotions go, I, especially at first, was really very angry. And so I just knew that was part of the whole scene of things, and absolutely have had regrets. With sorrow and sadness, as many of you have probably shared, probably never been greater than at the time when you lose a partner. Doubt, yeah, which then can lead to issues of who do I trust, particularly when I'm thinking about healthcare. And a whole lasting sense of emptiness and hollowness that will ebb and flow. I feel it particularly in the evenings. But I think the greatest sense of loss for me has been, first of all, a loss of companionship. That's probably number one. But there's also a loss of shared experiences. There's not going to be a Columbia River riverboat trip next year as we had hoped. There won't be any more sharing of what our past experiences and our recollections were about special events, about our return to Yellowstone in 2016 on our 50th anniversary, our trip to Alaska and to Hawaii, and so many other experiences that were not as major. But one of the things I'm really sad about is that we won't be able to watch the wetland developed on land that was passed down to us through Lois's family. It was just put in place probably a year or two ago, and it hadn't even begun to reach what the potential would be. I do need to share with you that probably my greatest loss, in a way, has been that we won't be working together to invest in the future, what happens beyond our lifetime. Yes, we'd started by establishing endowments at our respective colleges, and we will continue to do that kind of thing because the matter of quality education is important. We won't be investing in public television because of what it provides. that you can't find anywhere else. And we want to make sure that Iowa PBS can continue to produce local programming. And we won't be able to share in the care of the land that has been entrusted to us by her family, or the matter of participating with people in the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation in terms of the work they do, and also the matter of supporting the care of what happens at Yellowstone. And there won't be any longer sharing in terms of caring for our communities, church community being one, the communities where we have lived and do live, the communities that we and our children care about, the LGBTQ plus community, the communities that enable women to have access to needed reproductive services, the environment, and being connected to people who care about peace and justice throughout the world. Having sort of laid out for you my current experience and current struggles, I want to share with you some glimpses of Lois that came over the 56 plus years we were together. An Iowa farm girl and a preacher's kid from Colorado met in the summer of 1965. We were working in the area around Lake Hotel. About the only date we could really have was going to the Ham or Hamilton store that was near the hotel. There we could sip on probably Cokes, but one of the things I remember most is listening to Barbra Streisand and Sing People. Over the next 9 or 10 months, we supported the U.S. Postal Service. Somehow the schedule of our respective colleges made it possible that we were able to go to the McPherson winter formal together, probably our first and only real date. After marrying in Panora, as the obituary indicated, we headed for Idaho to a UCC camp called Pilgrim Cove. As was kind of typical at the time, churches and church-related bodies were kind of used to getting 2 people for the price of 1. And I got to tell you, boy, did they get a deal with Lois. She really did help things go so smoothly that summer, working with people in the kitchen and so many other things that just made a huge difference. And that was her. Where needed, she pitched in. We then went on to New York City. But one of the things that happened was Lois got turned around as we were getting into New York City. So for the whole time we were there, the sun rose in the west and set in the east. But that wasn't the only thing that was disorienting to her. She had an intruder in her kitchen. Me. She was used to her father. If her mother was going to be away, she would put a plate in the oven to keep warm until he came in from whatever he was doing on the farm. She never saw her father or any other man be involved in things in the kitchen. And that was something that kind of came back again and again over our time together. Because Lois had a really strong sense of what her responsibilities were. And kitchen and everything around it was part of what she felt like was her responsibility. During that intern year when we were in Kansas, she taught in this little district. It was the Spearville-Windhorst School District. A very significantly Catholic community. And in one of the schools where she taught, there were a group of probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 or 6 nuns that still were teaching there even after the school had stopped being a parochial school. And I think that Lois's work at Union in the first years we were there really helped her to be able to be more at ease in working with the sisters, because she had such a good relationship with all of them, but particularly with one. I need to tell you about a story that comes from our journey from New York to Britt. It's probably a story that the people at U-Haul would not want me to tell or not want me to call, as they put on their trucks, an adventure in moving. We'd hired a U-Haul, we got it loaded, and we're starting out, and somewhere in Pennsylvania I found out that there was a brake light that was not working. And since it was a Ford truck, we could pull into a Ford dealer, and we did that, I think, the second morning, and got the light fixed. Minor? Yeah, okay. And things went along really, really well. But as we were crossing Illinois, we got to one of those places where they were working on a bridge, and there was one-way traffic, a traffic light at each end. And after I had stopped the truck, and she was driving our car behind, I went to try and move forward, and nothing happened. The transmission had gone out. So we got towed to the local U-Haul dealer. They didn't have anybody to move our stuff from one truck to another, so they said that they would pay us, and it was probably a pretty nominal sum, but had to back trucks within just a short distance of each other. We moved our things from one truck to another. I don't know what the temperature was, but it was not very cool. And the humidity had to be one of those days when the dew point was probably 70 degrees or higher. It was really, really humid. And that was a major, of course, just hiccup along the way. And we found a place to stay overnight, and I was coming to Lois and said, boy, this truck gets so much better mileage than the last one we had. And as we were headed west out of Cedar Rapids, I found out why. The gas gauge didn't work really well. We ran out of gas. And the U-Haul people in Cedar Rapids had a fellow come out, put some gas in, and whatever much he put in, it wouldn't do anything to start the truck. He had to go to a neighboring farm and be able to, I'm sure, buy some gasoline from the farmer to help us get on the way. Fortunately, that was the end of our adventure in moving. While we were in Britt, we were able to be very excited about our first pregnancy. But what happened is Lois had a miscarriage. And many of you may have had the experience and know how devastating that can be. But one of the amazing things that happened was a number of older women in the church came to Lois and they talked to her. They told her about their experience, which would have happened many years before. But they were so comforting and reassuring that it really helped us to be able to get to a point where we didn't feel as much like we were the first people that had ever happened to. And they, of course, provided a whole lot more support to Lois than I ever could have. While we were in New Braunfels, before the birth of Ray, Lois had gone to our family doctor who was going to do the delivery. And he was really skeptical about this Lamaze stuff. He really wasn't sure that this was a good idea. He misunderstood. He thought I wanted to be at his elbow right there for the delivery. And Lois had to explain and to some degree convince him that wasn't the case, that I would be there as her coach. And being something of an older physician, but somebody very, very caring, he allowed that to happen. I'm sure part of it against his better judgment. And I need to mention about our experiences, one particular experience, a cluster of experiences in Omaha. In Omaha, our family, we discovered hot air ballooning. The first thing we did was we went to an event that was at a local high school field not far from where we lived. That led to my responding to an ad that was in the student newspaper at University of Nebraska, Omaha, and I started crewing for a man, and that then resulted in his family, he and his wife and 2 little girls, and our family being involved together in numerous balloon experiences. And I still can remember Ray being just ecstatic when she would see balloons as they were inflating, and it just was something that was fantastic for her. And even through changes in our families, we've maintained contact, and Lois and I together crewed with Steve and others when he was flying at the balloon fiesta in Albuquerque, where some of you may know they have like some 800 balloons. And that was a tremendous experience, just being able to share that and being with friends and all. When we moved to Minot and then Marshall, each one of our children had some significant health problems. And as is typical of a family, it was very stressful for us. But that was one of those things where Lois handled things with such a poise and strength in terms of that came from her background, that this would be something that we would get through together. And to say that she was a trooper, not just in this instance, but really through the whole time of our marriage, is really an understatement. She helped me increase my understanding of people with different physical limitations when she worked for a Center for Independent Living when we were in Marshall, Minnesota. I want to conclude by telling you how my father referred to Lois as his angel. This had to do with the care that she provided to my mother, who had dementia, and the support and care she provided to my dad through the later years of his life, especially after he moved here to Mayflower. But those of you that knew Lois very well at all also might not be surprised to know that she could be stubborn. I think she wanted me, and maybe even the doctors, not to know how sick she was. I remember her saying to me, probably on more than one occasion, "I'm supposed to take care of you." And there was the complicating factor of the cognitive decline that she was experiencing. She found that incredibly frustrating. Even with the reassurance I tried to provide, she had a hard time accepting that she needed my care. She was a gutsy and caring woman.
Good morning. For those of you who don't know me or for whom it's been many years, my name is Lois Strickler and I'm Lois's youngest child. I had prepared a couple of different versions of what I wanted to share today. And at first I thought about sharing what was for me a dark night of the soul approximately 10 years ago, and which lasted several months. And the fact that I credit my mom's love with getting me through it. But that felt too focused on my internal experience rather than my mom's life, which is what I want to focus on. So next I considered sharing my anger, regret, and sadness regarding my mom's death. But as I said, I want to focus on her life. So I finally decided to share a handful of memories of my mom. And what I share today is not meant to gloss over the challenges that we experienced individually and as a family, but I'm choosing to focus on the good stuff today. So as some of you may know or remember about me, I was a very concerned child. The night before my first day of kindergarten, I had many questions, and one of the things I was most concerned about was the pronunciation of my name. I worried to my mom, what if the kids at school try to call me Mara? And my mom encouraged me, you just tell them that your name is Mara, like Sarah or Tara or Kara, which I did with such frequency and insistence that by the day we had our first substitute teacher and they called for Mara in the roll, my classmates all said in unison, it's Mara. I was in elementary school in rural Minnesota during the AIDS crisis of the 1980s. And even though I was a child, I was very aware of the hurt and trauma that this illness was causing, and which was multiplied by homophobia and heteronormativity, words I, of course, didn't know at that time, but understood inherently. Hearing about the havoc being wrought on the gay community, I remember feeling a sense of resonance and connection with those others being talked about on the news. And around this time, because I didn't have the language yet for how to describe myself, I asked Lois, Mama, will you still love me if I'm gay? After a slight but noticeable to me pause, she replied, of course, Mara. Of course I'd still love you. As an adolescent, I really struggled in school. And in my first year of high school, I learned of Scattergood Friend School. I took the initiative to apply, and to my excitement, I was accepted. While Mom certainly didn't stop me from going, she was not necessarily entirely on board at the beginning. The additional expense, what it meant to her class identity to have a child in boarding school, and the fact that me and my sibling, who had graduated from high school early, were both out of the home at an earlier age than had been expected. But on my first visit back to my parents' home after starting at Scattergood, my mom expressed to me her appreciation for the changes that she'd seen in me already from being at Scattergood. And while I knew that I was certainly feeling better about myself being there, it was nice to hear that reflected from her, and for us to know as a family that Scattergood was a place where I would be able to succeed and thrive, and that she would support me through that experience. One of the things that I think was really important to my mom was helping her kids live their ethics to the best of the ability in a world that does its best to keep us from doing that. And when I moved back to Iowa, I let my mom know that I had become vegan, that was an ethical choice that I'd made for myself. And while that was very different from her own values and ethics, she really jumped in with 2 feet, collecting recipes and searching out vegan products, which was made all the more challenging because I have an allergy to soy. I thought she was doing a great job, but Mama wasn't always pleased with the results. And on one visit, when she was feeling especially frustrated, I did my best to reassure her and thank her for her efforts. And Mama responded that she wanted to do her best to support me and my choices and to feel comfortable, and for me to feel comfortable visiting them, and that she wanted me around. And that was just one of the many ways that she was able to show me how much she loved me. Early on in the pandemic, I began making regular supply runs for my folks. And during this time, which turned out to be over a year, we were dutifully wearing masks, not hugging, and not sharing meals together. I would drop off the supplies, and we would briefly chat in the doorway between the house and the garage. But every time I would leave, after saying our goodbyes, Mama would come outside, her mask off, and stand at the doorway. And as if it were the last time we would see each other, we would wave goodbye, sending love and hugs to me. And again, I cannot tell you how loved this made me feel to see her standing there. And every time I would think, that's my mama. That's my mama. I never wanted to be in a world that did not include my mom. And it has been hard for me to make sense of the world without her. I feel really brokenhearted by her death. One thing I know about her is that she wanted me to be happy, purpose-driven, and fulfilled. So I hold on to that a little bit more fiercely as I figure out my life without her in it. While we struggled in our relationship at times, I know that ultimately we were proud to call each other family and deeply committed to each other despite any hardships we weathered over the years. And for that, I am very grateful. Thank you.
Friends, as our service comes to a close, I want to give you a few directions that will help as we transition from up here to downstairs. There will be a reception downstairs that you are welcome and invited and encouraged to attend. Gail and Mara will be out here in this kind of foyer space off of this door of the sanctuary. So after the service, once they're out and settled, you're invited to exit the sanctuary from the front so you can pass through and look at the beautiful mementos that are in place, greet them in the hall, and then either proceed to the elevator or stairs on either end of the building to make your way down to the Friendship Hall. Our time together set aside for this moment of remembrance is coming to a close. But as has been noted time and again, Lois and her love and her essence and her goodness lives on eternal in each of us. And as we prepare to go and carry that into the world with us, I pray that these words of benediction would go with you. Life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who make the journey with us. So let's be swift to love and make haste to be kind. And may the blessing of God, who made us, who loves us, and who travels with us, be with you now and forever. Amen.